Hello, and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. I'm Emma, and my guest today is microblogger Charlotte Ellison, who goes by the wonderfully poetic name on Instagram of mood swings and other things. Welcome to the podcast, Charlotte.
Thank you for having me, Emma. It's nice to talk to you.
We had a little mini discussion off air about how we could best describe you and came up with microblogger. You were just telling me how you'd started off writing a blog. Yeah. And then sort of transitioned over to Instagram. What made you start your blog originally? Was there anything in particular that prompted you?
Do you know? No, I don't think. Well, I think other than a sense of I've always really liked writing, and I kind of lost that once I turned into like a fully functioning adult and was no longer sort of in the education.
Have no free time.
Yeah, and I found it really cathartic. There's been, and I'm quite old school like that, I suppose. When I've got something that's really weighing me down, I like to talk it out or I like to write it out. And I think I found it quite cathartic. And I think I'd had quite a chaotic few years just in terms of my health, I suppose, and in terms of working out exactly what was going on with me at the time. And like my mental health wasn't brilliant. My anxiety was really bad, and just writing about it seemed to kind of help me make more sense of it all, I suppose, and put it into context. And then there was a part of me that was also kind of, well, if I do this and I put it out there, maybe it might help somebody else that feels the same way. I don't think I had absolutely any idea whatsoever that there were quite so many women, as I sort of subsequently, months and years, whatever, later down the line, sort of came into contact with via Instagram. I had no concept that it was such a big thing.
Yeah, it's not just me.
No, but I did kind of, I suppose there was an element of that to it, just in terms of I want to share my story just in case, somebody else, I don't want other people to feel as terrified as I did, because I was terrified for a time and I really thought there was something seriously wrong with me. And it turns out it's not, it's not anything serious at all. It's quite straightforward. And actually it happens to every single woman. But because I didn't know, so I suppose it wasn't anything more than that in the beginning.
Yeah, we do hear that kind of time and time again that people, not always, but a lot of the time, sort of struggle along, and as you've said, they think it's just them until perhaps they find kind of somebody like you on Instagram, and it's a sort of huge sigh of relief of like, oh, okay, it's not just me. There are other people going through this out there as well, and I think that's one of the reasons that your account has resonated with so many people, is like, you are very brutally honest about the kind of what you're going through, your own experiences. And I don't know, I find it quite difficult to share on Instagram. I don't know what it is. I think I'm just quite a private person, and I kind of have to really force myself kind of out of my comfort zone to the rare occasions that I might record a video. Does it get easier the more that you've kind of done it? Have you got over the ick factor of kind of being on camera?
Here's the thing, right? I think if you know me in real life, I think a lot of people that know me and that have known me for years would describe me as probably something of an introvert. I am not somebody that, holds court in the kitchen at parties, and I am not someone that loves to be the centre of attention. And that has been one of the most amazing liberations of social media, because I was someone that really missed the Facebook boat. Like, Facebook came out when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, and I'd always been quite smug about that, because had I been in the workplace, I think I'd have been on it constantly with people. But because I was kind of an age where I had a baby and, my focus was everything on that, I kind of missed the Facebook boat. And I was always quite smug about the fact that, I didn't really do social media. I had an Instagram page, a private Instagram page, where I used to put, pictures and things occasionally, but that was about my limit. And it's weird. I still can't get my head around how I do show up on Instagram sometimes and just don't give a shit. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
And as I say, I found that extremely liberating because I am not, and I always get really nervous when I meet people in person, particularly people that I've met through Instagram, because I kind of feel like, oh shit, they're going to feel like,
They've got this impression of you
yeah,
as a very gregarious,
yeah. I
outgoing
do
kind
feel a
of.
bit like, oh, they're going to feel a bit shortchanged because actually, it's very odd how at ease I am chatting to my phone, but it is literally like just it's like a sounding board that doesn't answer back, if that makes sense. Except it does, because obviously when you put something out
Mm.
there and you get feedback back from people that are watching it, that's amazing and lovely. And that's always been, brilliant but fascinating to me as well, because it's just kind of, what is it that, but equally, yeah, it is something that I'm constantly trying to encourage other people to do, because I'm like, honestly, and it does become easier. It does become one of those things
Mm.
that I think the more you do it, the less you care about it, for sure. But it is weirdly at odds. I read, I don't know, a few months ago, you can be an introvert, extrovert, or something along those lines. And that seemed to,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, sum me up in some respects, because it's just weird how you can do it, because you don't feel like it's going out to anybody specific, if that makes sense. And I think that's why I find it probably easy, and I actually quite enjoy it. It's like if I've got something in my head and I want to just kind of like get it.
A confessional.
Yeah, you can just it's just like a sounding board, but yeah, it is strangely at odds sometimes with how I can present myself in real life, in non-social media life, shall we say, at times. Yeah, yeah,
Offline
offline.
world.
That's the
Is
way. That's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there times when you felt a bit of trepidation in terms of if you were about to share something that was very raw or very difficult for you, or I don't know, have there been times where you've sort of done it and then hit the delete button, or kind of had to really think about
No, I'm going to
something
be
that you were
really honest with
sharing?
you. No, and you know what? I'm going to lay the credit for that at all the amazing people that follow me and just are so supportive. I think as a community of women, the menopause, perimenopause, whatever you want to call it, midlife community on Instagram, I just think has always been nothing but wonderful and lovely and supportive to me. And no, I've never ever worried about. I think sometimes when it comes to the actual nitty gritty of things, like talking about periods, I think, for example, some women just find yuck, and it's kind of like the language and the stuff that and I mean, by very nature of talking about things like menopause and perimenopause, some of the symptoms, some of the side effects, some of the things we want to talk about are not conversation friendly in many respects, and that's what's interesting again, isn't it? Is it's just kind of like you try and initiate those conversations. Sometimes you're down the pub with your mates, or you're at work with, and it's like you can see people physically recoil because it's just too
Mm,
embarrassing.
flinch.
Yeah, and yet again, it's just like within the little Instagram world, I don't kind of feel like those boundaries exist. It's so no, I don't think I've ever felt like I've had to filter anything, or certainly there's nothing in my story or kind of anything I've experienced that I would deliberately think, no, I can't say that, because I have filmed myself when I've been sitting on a bench crying my eyes out and I don't know why. And I think it's important to show that and share that, because I think it's the same
Yeah.
reality for a lot of women, and I
Well, so much of Instagram is the shiny, and the, here I am on holiday, or kind of, living my best life kind of stuff. And actually, I think that's why what you're doing resonates with so many people, is that kind of vulnerability and that realness.
Thank you. I mean, I think for me, it is a journey of kind of ups and downs. The nature of kind of the hormonal roller coaster that it is means that some days you feel like you're on top of the world, and some days you don't want to get out of bed. And I just think it's important to just be realistic about that, because there have been occasions where I've thought, God, people must think I'm bipolar or something. Because how can I be, on there one day and be like, oh, la la la, and then the next day be a right miserable cow and I've got no makeup on and I look like crap. And I just think, but that's how it is for me. Some days you just never know what you're going to get, and it's not always consistent and it's not always linear. And I just think I like to follow accounts where I think people are similarly real, as you say. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors sometimes on social media in terms of what some people want to present and put across. And you know what, that works for some brands, for some products, for some influencers. You know, that's their whole image, and their business is built on
Yeah.
kind of what this image that they're selling that's perfect. And but yeah, you know, as someone that's nearly 50 in the middle of a shitstorm that's perimenopause, my life doesn't look like that, you know. And I just think for me, I couldn't do it if it wasn't real, because I just think I'm not into fakery or just
Mm.
pretending to be anything other than what it is, I suppose.
Is it interesting what you were talking about, the sort of the roller coaster? I was sort of showing my husband a sort of a graph basically of kind of what the estrogen is
Yeah.
doing in that kind of perimenopause, and I'm waving my hand up and down, but obviously you can't hear me because I'm on a podcast. But it's essentially it's oscillating from very very low up to high, and it's constantly doing that all the while that it is dropping. And he said that was just really interesting to kind of see that so represented so visually, and kind of understand a tiny bit about that roller coastering of hormones. And I think maybe that's sometimes what's harder for kind of partners to grasp, is that it can be absolutely fine in the morning. And I was crashing about the kitchen this morning because I was just in a meno-rage about not being able to find something in the kitchen, and there was just crap everywhere. And poor husband came in and was like, just take a deep breath. And I nearly stabbed him with a teaspoon. But and then an hour later, completely fine. But I think that's kind of quite hard sometimes for somebody to understand if they
Oh,
haven't
completely. I think,
lived that.
yeah, and I think I'm lucky in that respect. But I think my husband's had no choice but to learn, really, because I was pretty horrendous in the beginning, you know, and I think it, yeah, messed up, you know, and I think that was quite frightening for. I don't think he would have said so at the time, but I think it was confusing. It causes conflict. Do you know what I mean? Because there's so
Mm,
much more to it than just being a mardy cow, you know, or just being aggy with people for no reason. It's not like that, is it? And I think it pervades so much of my life, our family life at times, not all day, every day, but there are some days where,
no.
as you just said, you can be doing something really mundane, but you're losing your shit. Or the rest of my family can be carrying on as normal, and just the sound of their voices is doing my head in to the point where I've got to go
Yes,
to another.
that's a huge thing for
Yeah,
me. The noise
yeah.
sensitivity sometimes, and you can't explain it. It's like, it sounds ridiculous. It's like, you're just breathing too loud,
Yeah,
or
no, but it's real, isn't it? And that's the thing. And it's so difficult because it's literally like I can be sat in front of the TV sometimes. If it's up too loud or there are too many people talking at the same time, I'm literally sitting on my hands, kind of like, "Oh, I can't sit still, you know, because it's driving me nuts."
uh,
And then
or having to turn the car stereo down because you're, like trying to navigate somewhere
yeah,
you've never been before. I'm like, children, I'm
yeah,
turning the radio off.
that whole ability to kind of like focus on anything other than the one thing that you need to, you know, it just goes, doesn't it? And it's so frustrating, and it's difficult for them because you go from being this kind of adept multitasker to someone that, you know, kind of is capable and manages everything, and then you suddenly do become this bumbling kind of idiot. I won't use the word that I would usually use because it's rude, but you know, and it's kind of, you're confused by it, they're even more confused by it, you know. But I think the only way kind of through that sort of thing is to just be completely honest, you know. I'm a big advocate
No,
for just,
definitely spend a lot of time apologizing
yeah,
to,
and just holding your
to
hands up and
everyone.
saying, "Do you know what? It's not nice, you know, and I'm sorry, but it's not. I can't help it." And yeah, but I mean, it comes down to lack of
Mm.
education, doesn't it? At the end of the day, across the board. I mean, we don't know enough about it at our age, in our generation. And I just think, even my kids, I don't think they've really been taught a great deal. And I mean, they're still going through the secondary system, but I think they probably will have a better understanding just because I don't lie about it, you know. And if I'm crying over something absolutely ridiculous, dumb, you know, I'm just like, honestly, I don't know why I'm crying. It's okay though, I'm fine. It's all good.
Your two are a bit older than mine. I think they're both teenagers. So reassure me that it's going to be okay when mine are teenagers, and that all the hormones are kind of going all the time. How have you ever had any kind of
Oh, it's hideous.
head to head
Oh, it's
moments?
hideous because I've got two girls. So I mean, I'm going, you know, and that's, again, I think that's one of the really Mother Nature is not a very nice person, is she really? Because she sort of sets
It's a cruel joke.
perimenopause upon you, literally, just as your kids go into their own kind of maelstrom of hormones. And so, I mean, my oldest daughter's just turned 18, and my youngest is about to turn 15. And I mean, it's not a good cocktail in this house at certain times of the month, shall I say, and that's what I mean when I say my husband's had no choice but to learn, really, because
I was the oldest of three girls, so I do wonder how my dad managed to
yeah,
kind of come through all of that unscathed.
yeah,
So.
yeah, it's a lot. It's asking a lot. I think it tests their patience for sure, but equally, I think it's a very deep learning curve, and I think I hope that they will have a bigger appreciation, perhaps, of what to expect and what's coming as they grow older, perhaps.
How do your girls feel about you being on social media? Are they sort of
Huh.
secretly quite proud of your
It's a little bit of an irritant that
shenanigans?
I've got more followers than they have, to be fair. So, I mean, that, but it doesn't carry any kudos, sadly. I mean, I've had to work very hard to keep my profile because, I mean, in actual fact, nobody in my life calls me Lotti. I'm Charlotte to most, and Charlie to people that have known me sort of since I was a teenager when
Mm.
I was too cool to be called Charlotte. So I insisted everybody called me Charlie. But when I came to Instagram and started writing, because I work in a school and because both my children go to the school that I work at, and obviously, therefore, there is kind of no separation in many respects between
Mm.
a lot of the social media. I didn't want to be inundated with kids from the school where I work asking to follow me. I didn't.
It's like, Miss, you're on
Yeah.
Instagram.
And so that's why my profile is obviously set to Lotti, because I thought no one's going to recognise that. They won't know that's me. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, so far, so good. In the years that I've been doing it, it's worked really successfully. But I think in a lot of ways, they're quite proud of me because I have got in the beginning, they were like, oh, Mum, you're so cringe, some of the stuff you say. And I just don't give a shit. I'm like, but I'm nearly 50. I'm not 18. So I don't care what you think. Do you know what I mean? And again, it's been really liberating in that regard. And I'd like to hope that they're a little bit proud of me. The eldest one tells me that she's proud of what I'm doing, and she's quite open
Oh,
about it, to people that she knows. I think the younger one is still at that stage where obviously it would be very cringy if someone was to point out, I've seen your mum on Instagram. And I am mindful sometimes when some of the posts that I put up, just because I think, would I be happy if someone ever came across that at some point? But as I say, for the most part, it doesn't really have a bearing on what I do.
and you've talked this week on your account about deciding that you're going to go cold turkey and give up drinking. So
Yeah.
maybe talk about that a little bit, because I think it's something that a lot of us get to this point and start thinking that the trade-offs maybe just aren't worth it anymore. Is it something that you've been thinking about doing for a long time?
Yeah, quite a while, I think, really. I mean, I don't want to get into demonizing alcohol because I just think I am, when
Mm.
it comes to my diet and things like that, I think I've gone very restrictive at times in the past. That's not healthy, and I think that was more symptomatic of kind of my mental health at the time than it was a physical thing. But I know for sure that for me, and I think for a lot of people, restriction is not a good out and out restriction is not a good thing, and actually a little bit of everything in moderation does you no harm whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? That's generally kind of the way I try to eat and drink a lot of the time, but I'd be lying if I said that. Number one, alcohol just doesn't really agree with me anymore, or wine certainly doesn't agree with me anymore. I think I was definitely part of the knackered mums club in my 30s. I always had a bottle of wine in the fridge. I used to have a glass probably pretty much every night once my kids went to bed at about 7 o'clock, because that was my treat because I'd earned it. And I can't cope with wine anymore. It doesn't agree with me. And I'll be really honest, as I say, I'm not, this is not to demonize alcohol, but I just think there's a lot of shit in wine that is not good for you. I think it's responsible for quite a lot of how you feel in terms of low mood and things, like if it's something that you're drinking often and regularly. And I say that as someone that was doing that. I wasn't drinking a bottle a night or anything like that, but having a glass, two glasses every night, most nights, would then show up in my mood the following day, you know, and I was
Mm.
irritable and I was bad tempered and I had no patience and I was moody. And yeah, I think it's just not great for me. And I don't drink a great deal. I never have been a big drinker. I hate being. I'm a typical Capricorn. I'm a control freak. I like to be in control. I don't like.
Fellow Capricorn here, I
Yay!
hear you.
So I don't like.
Yeah, happy birthday. I should have said that at the beginning.
Uh,
You just celebrated
um,
a
I don't.
birthday.
So I've never been a big drinker. I can't stand being hungover. I just think it's a gross waste of a day to be, you know, holed up in bed,
Mm.
hanging over the side of it, like wanting to vomit. So I I don't. Yeah, I've never really been a big drinker because I just can't stand being hungover primarily. But and I just got to a point a while ago, probably over a year ago, where I just thought, is there really any point in this? Because I just have one every so often. And while I could argue to myself, well, you know, a bit like with the food thing, I think as I wrote, I never shut the door on anything food wise. I mean, I like to eat like a vegetarian, but I'd never say that I'm giving up meat because I actually enjoy meat when I want it. So I've kind
Mm.
of just been adopting a similar attitude to alcohol really. And then when I thought about it over Christmas, I just thought, I drink so rarely in such a small amount that I just think, wouldn't it, what's the point from a health perspective?
Be easier just to say I don't drink
Yeah,
at all.
yeah, you know,
Mm.
or at least try. So that's all I'm, you know, and it's been really interesting actually because I mean I've had a lot. There've been quite a lot of comments on that thread today, all of which that have been super encouraging. There've been a number of people that have actually said, "Oh, I've done something similar, given it up for a year, and then I just have the odd one occasionally." And I just think I could see me doing that in the future, but equally, I think I could also see me not drinking again in the future. So I think I'm just going to try and stick with, yeah, not having a drink and see how, you know, how I feel about that. Yeah. But I feel, I don't know why, but I do feel like it's a really awkward subject for people, you know, or an uncomfortable
Yeah,
subject. And I'm not sure what it is about it that provokes that in people.
it's so normalised, isn't it? It's that kind of peer pressure thing. I was actually talking to my husband about it earlier because he's starting a new job next week where there'll be kind of regular events
Mm.
in the sort of the centre, and you know there'll be kind of drinks afterwards
That's
after the
hard, isn't
talk.
it?
And
I think
yeah,
yeah, when it's such,
yeah, but why do we have to make it so
yeah,
difficult to be that kind of squeaky wheel that's like, oh, you know, be apologetic, have you got any
yeah.
non-alcoholic beer, or you know, is there anything for me as the non-drinking person apart from orange juice or water that's just a bit more kind of
It is,
interesting?
isn't it? I
So
think so much, you know, so much of our social culture is tied up in alcohol. But interestingly, though, someone did put on the thread about doing a sober rave, and I thought, yeah, I'm well up for that actually. So I'm going to go back and read that comment because I thought that's got to be a good crack. Surely that's got to be good. Yeah, and you know that's
definitely.
part and parcel of it. I just think it's about looking at what I can do instead, you know, opening my eyes a bit and being a bit more kind of to other ways to spend time aside from being in the pub. But that's not to say I don't like being in the pub. I do like being in the pub. I'm not going to have a drink.
I don't know. I've been talking around the sort of, you know, the drinking not drinking topic quite a lot, and definitely we cut back a lot at the end of last year, but then, you know, kind of had this, not binge drinking over Christmas and New Year, but definitely drinking kind of more at normal levels, and now kind of gone back to not really drinking at all. So yeah, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of still undecided on that one. I might, as you say, might sort of just be a every now and then drinker,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah, but
that
there's
is.
nothing wrong with that. You know, I don't think. I think it's I don't know. We get so hung up on this kind of it has to be all or nothing. It's not healthy, really. And as I say, I stand by what I do think. A little bit of everything in moderation is absolutely fine. And it's not for me to preach to anybody else. It's just a personal thing in terms of I drink so rarely, and if I drink in any great quantity, it doesn't seem to agree with me. So actually, I'm just coming to a personal decision about is there really any point for me? But I know plenty of people that can drink well and it doesn't affect them, you know, and that's great. But I'm just not one of those people, unfortunately. So
the aftermath or whatever, even if it's not a hangover, just feeling rubbish for longer.
Yeah, and it shows up in terms of I don't really have a problem with hot flushes usually because I don't have a great deal of caffeine in my diet, and it's just not a symptom that's ever really troubled me. But I do notice it if I have a drink, and I tend to ping awake at sort of 3 in the morning if I've had a drink and I'm wide awake. And I mean, at this stage in my life, like no sleep or crap sleep is just like the worst thing you can do to me because it's just like,
Yeah, so why would you willingly
yeah,
make that
exactly.
happen?
It just pervades like every aspect of the following day very negatively for me if I have not slept well. So yeah, I'm afraid like I have reached that sad point in midlife where I'm just like anything for a good night's sleep. So the alcohol's got to go.
And do you think you'll keep micro blogging kind of as things roll along, or if and when the symptoms stop, will that be the end, or will it just morph into something else?
I don't know. I'd like to think it would morph into something else. I just love the connection that I have from it. It's just brought me into contact with so many amazing people. The conversations that you get to have just expand your world a little bit. And there's something
Mm.
really lovely about that because I think 10 years ago, I'd have been very much the sort of person that would just be kind of like, no, I've got all my friends, don't need any more friends. Thank you very much. And I just think I've met and made friends with so many people online but also in person, and it's given me such a sense of fulfillment and a sense of camaraderie and a purpose in some respects, because obviously when I do get some really nice feedback about thank you for sharing this, or oh my god, I'm so grateful because I just thought I was the only one, and that really does give me a huge, well, it is just a sense of real, like, it just makes me feel happy and I get a lot out
Mm.
of it. I think it's really simple. It's a really simple way to, yeah, help boost me. It's quite selfish, really, in a way, but I think I will keep writing about it. I mean, I think the first 18 months, 2 years I was doing it, I was writing a post a day. I can't keep that up anymore because just by nature of kind of the response that a post kind of uh here's the brain fog in action, can't think of the word that will,
Oh, the comments and the
yeah,
kind of the interaction
the,
for,
the,
yeah.
the, the two-way kind of thing that gets going every time you put a post. I don't have enough hours in my day because of working. I don't have enough hours in my day, and I feel bad about that because I do feel a sense of kind of responsibility, in as much as if I'm writing something and inviting that response, it's important to me that I go back to everybody that's taken the time to respond. But invariably, the more the account grows, the longer that takes, and the harder that is sometimes to fit in terms of just with real life and having to go to work and stuff like that. So I certainly don't post as often now, but I think I will continue to write for as long as, I'm going through a relatively calm period at the moment, she says, touching all the wood that she's.
You need some material.
I think, and you can read that into kind of my Instagram, I suppose, because when it's bad and there's a lot going on, I'm ranting on the daily. I think at the moment I seem to have found kind of a supplement regime that appears to be working or doing quite a lot for me. And I do feel quite settled and as though everything's on an even keel. Now, I'm not stupid enough to think that's going to last forever because it generally doesn't. But I think that does impact on kind of how much I feel I've got to say, because whilst I think it's important to acknowledge when things are going great. Obviously, it doesn't give you a great deal to kind of, you just go, oh, well, and then it almost feels a little bit like you're crowing, because obviously there's a lot of people that are still really struggling. And you go, well,
Mm.
actually, I'm all right over here for the time being.
But that's part of that kind of authenticity again, isn't it? It's like you own it when it's good, and
Yeah,
own it
well,
when
this is true.
it's absolutely not.
That's the thing, and I mean, it's, as I say, I'm not naive enough to think it's going to stay that way forever. I very much doubt it, but I think it's. I've come a long way since the beginning. I think things were very, very bad for a period before I even got to Instagram, and I think by the time I got to Instagram, I'd already come over probably my biggest hills in terms of challenges with my mental health and kind of physical symptoms and things like that. And I think it was challenging just
Mm.
because I didn't really understand it at the time.
You've said that you were put on antidepressants at one point, but they didn't really
No.
agree with
I
you.
hated them. I really hated them, and again, that's my personal experience. But what was interesting was I'd been in and out of my doctors on numerous occasions after I'd had my second daughter. So, the best part of my mid to late 30s, I don't think my hormones ever recovered properly after I gave birth the second time, if I'm honest. And I think,
Mm.
and every time I went in, and it's really vivid for me sitting, the memory of sitting in front of my doctor and just getting really upset and being like, but I don't understand why one day I feel fine and the next I don't, nothing's changed in my life. And I was going back to a time where, I didn't have anything to worry about. I was stay at home mum, I was really lucky. I didn't have to go to work, everything was kind of quite stable and secure. And it was just really confusing to me as to why I felt so low at times. But there was never really any conversation around the fluctuation, it was just, you have
Mm.
these. And so every time I left with the impression that they thought I was depressed because they were just prescribing me antidepressants. And I just thought, but I'm not depressed. I can't be depressed because some days I feel fine. And I look back and think, how could you be so stupid as to not think that, oh, this is hormonal? Because it's really obvious and clear now. But obviously, it just didn't even enter my kind of sphere of consideration back then. And I mean, it got really bad. I only took the antidepressants because by that point I'd hit my first episode of intrusive thoughts, which were horrendous and really, really difficult to deal with, very
Mm.
upsetting. It was incredibly traumatic. And I mean, I literally went to the doctors just before New Year's Eve that year and broke down like really badly. And I mean, she just pushed the prescription across the desk and said, I think you need these, you need to take these. And I mean, I just desperately wanted anything at that point that was going to stop what was going on, because it just felt confusing and I felt like I was losing my mind a bit. And I didn't get it. And again, to someone that's so used to being in control, the worst feeling ever is to not have any control whatsoever over anything. And I thought, oh, taking these
Mm.
tablets, that's going to help me control this. I have to say it didn't. It made me feel 10 times worse. But that's my personal experience. I know lots of women that have been helped tremendously with PMDD, lots of perimenopausal symptoms by taking citalopram and Prozac and other sorts of antidepressants. So I don't want to demonise them for everybody. They've definitely got a place, but they really didn't help me. But they did help me perversely in a weird way, because it galvanised me to just say, I'm not doing this. I've got to look at what else I can do to help myself, because this isn't working. This isn't the way, And I mean, that's very much what put me on a path to kind of just reading, learning, educating myself and understanding, exactly what was going on hormonally, and then looking at kind of all the things I could do around that to.
Mm. Was there a sort of a light bulb moment then for you where you were kind of like, ah, perimenopause?
Yeah, I think I came across, actually, I was reading an article and it was by a guy called Nick Panay, and he is
Hmm.
a gynecologist at the Chelsea and West, or was at the time, I think. But he either set up or was very heavily involved in kind of a menopause clinic at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And I just remember reading an article there, and or not there, but by him, and thinking, oh. And then I'd never heard the term perimenopause before that. I thought menopause, my mum had a book on her bookshelf that was Miriam Stoppard, and it was how to deal with your menopause. And it was Miriam Stoppard in a leotard, and then that was the front cover of the book. And then that to me was menopause, sort of a woman of about 55 in a leotard. And yeah, I'd never heard the term perimenopause or thought that you could be in this sort of transition period that could go on for years before you actually hit the point of technical menopause. So yeah, that was a bit of that was kind of, and also the other thing that was a light bulb moment was I went to a homeopath. I was recommended an amazing, amazing homeopath by a friend of mine, and she gave me what the doctor didn't, which was her time. and she just sat down and explained very much about the endocrine system and how it's linked to all the body's other systems. And she did this brilliant analogy of an orchestra, and she just said, look, it's really straightforward, you know, if one section of the orchestra isn't playing to time, then it throws everything else out. And it just all made sense, you know. I was like, oh yeah, that's really straightforward, isn't it?
That's interesting that you say that, because I think, so often just that act of being deeply heard is the real game changer for people.
Massively. And she
Yeah.
listened, and then, you know, the best thing was she just said, I can help you to feel better. It's not going to be quick, but because she was like, your hormones are all over the place, because I'd had my bloods tested by that point and all my hormone levels, and I mean the NHS tests had come back as well, you're within normal range. But I mean, if you do some research as to what the NHS normal range is, you know, it's kind of so vast that you can be up one end or right down the other end and still be considered normal, when of course, you know,
Plus it's fluctuating hour to hour,
yeah,
day to day anyway, so
it's you don't obviously need to have your hormone levels tested if you're within a certain age now to, you know, to be diagnosed as perimenopausal. But I mean, back then I suppose I was looking for some sort of validation, which I didn't get, because, you know, as I say, the GPs were very much kind of, oh, this all looks normal. But she was very much kind of like, everything you're describing just fits with kind of, the fact that your hormones are starting to just play up a little bit. And that was really helpful to me, because it did just, there's a lot to be said, I think, for having your mind put at rest. You know, once, for me, knowledge was very much part of a big part of being able to settle the anxiety side of things around, God, what the hell's happening to me? You know, once I knew it and understood it, it didn't have quite so much power over me. You know, I didn't find it quite so frightening. So
that's so true. Well, thank you for everything that you're doing to reassure the good citizens of Instagram that they're not alone, that if they feel like throwing teaspoons at their significant other over the breakfast table, there's probably somebody else feeling very
I have
similar.
been, yeah.
Charlotte, it was such a delight to chat to you. Thank you again. And mood swings and other things over on Instagram, we'll put a link to your account in the show notes so that everybody can find you and follow you.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's been really nice chatting.
You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.